At 59, Margaret Turner had grown accustomed to a life of gentle routine. For years, her days followed the same comforting rhythm, each moment predictable and familiar. Her mornings began quietly, stirred awake not by alarms, but by the soft chorus of sparrows brushing against the maple tree outside her suburban Chicago home. She'd stand by the window for a while, watching the early sun spread over her small lawn, the dew sparkling like scattered beads of glass. Afterward came her slow walk to the mailbox, a ritual she rarely skipped, before settling down on the porch with a steaming cup of tea, letting its warmth seep into her hands. That house had been hers for decades, first as a newlywed alongside her late husband Robert, then as a young mother raising 2 children, and finally as a widow keeping memories alive. Each room was a capsule of time, photographs of school plays, wedding anniversaries, family Christmases, and quiet nights spent reading aloud to children who no longer lived there. Her daughter Emily, once the little girl with pigtails and endless questions, now worked as a nurse in bustling New York City. Her son Daniel lived across town with his wife and 2 energetic kids, caught up in the whirl of parenthood and work deadlines. Margaret loved them deeply, but her days had grown still. The house, once alive with laughter, slammed doors, and the scent of Sunday dinners, was now filled mostly with silence and echoes. Some afternoons, she found herself running her hand over Robert's old armchair, feeling its worn fabric like an old friend. It was on one such ordinary afternoon that the unexpected arrived. Margaret had ordered a modest set of groceries online: milk, bread, a small assortment of fruit, and a single slice of cake, her quiet indulgence for the week. She expected the delivery to be as uneventful as always. Yet when the doorbell rang, she opened the door to find not the middle-aged driver she was used to, but a boy who couldn't have been more than 19. He stood there with 2 large paper bags balanced carefully in his arms. His hair was a little tousled from the wind, his sneakers worn at the edges, and his uniform shirt slightly oversized. But his eyes, those bright, eager eyes, seemed to light up the doorway. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he greeted with a polite smile. "I'm Jason. I've got your delivery here." Margaret blinked, startled not by his presence, but by the sudden burst of youthful energy he carried with him. Something about his voice, the tone of it, reminded her of Daniel at that age, full of eagerness and determination, still half a boy but trying hard to be a man. She quickly stepped aside, gesturing toward the kitchen counter. "Thank you, Jason," she said softly. "I didn't realize they sent such young people out for these jobs." Jason laughed lightly. Not defensive, just good-natured. "Oh, I've been doing this for a while," he said, shifting the bags. "I'm working to save up for college. Every shift counts, you know." Margaret found herself smiling, though she hadn't meant to. It was rare these days for anyone's story to catch her interest so quickly. She admired his honesty, his willingness to work hard rather than waiting for opportunity to arrive on its own. "That's admirable," she replied sincerely. "Not many your age show that kind of dedication." Jason shrugged with a grin. "Well, my mom raised me that way. She always says, 'Nothing good comes easy.'" The word struck a familiar chord deep in Margaret's heart. She had said nearly the same thing to Emily and Daniel when they were young. Watching Jason, she was suddenly transported to mornings of scrambled eggs, spilled cereal, and last-minute homework. Years when she herself had been the one setting examples. Before Jason left, she surprised herself by asking, almost instinctively, "Would you like a glass of water before you go?" Jason hesitated for only a moment before nodding. She poured him a glass from the kitchen sink and handed it to him. He stood politely at the doorway, sipping it with a quiet, "Thank you." That small act of hospitality felt almost foreign to her, like slipping on an old coat she hadn't worn in years. When Jason handed the glass back and left, Margaret stood in the entryway longer than necessary, staring at the spot where he had been. Something inside her had shifted, though she couldn't yet name it. Over the next few weeks, Margaret found herself ordering groceries more often than usual, not out of necessity, but in the quiet hope that Jason might be the one to deliver them. Sometimes another worker arrived, but more often than not, it was him. Each time, he brought the same cheerful smile, the same light-hearted chatter that felt like fresh air in her still home. With each visit, their conversations grew a little longer. Jason shared snippets about his classes at the community college, his dream of transferring to a university, and his part-time work at a local hardware store to make ends meet. Margaret told him about her late husband, her children, and the years she had spent as a school librarian who loved recommending books to eager young readers. One rainy afternoon, Jason arrived drenched from a sudden downpour. Margaret hurried to fetch a towel, fussing over him as though he were family. He laughed at her concern, but gratefully dried his hair. "You remind me of my grandma," he said without thinking. Margaret chuckled, but the words warmed her heart instead of wounding her pride. She missed being that steady figure of comfort, someone others could rely on. It was during that visit Jason noticed the upright piano tucked into her living room corner, its lid closed, and keys collecting dust. "Do you play?" he asked curiously. "I used to," Margaret admitted. "I haven't touched it in years." "You should," Jason said. "My mom always says music keeps the heart young." His casual comment lingered in her mind long after he left. That evening, she lifted the lid and brushed dust from the keys. Her fingers trembled as she pressed a chord. The sound was rusty, hesitant, but it filled the room with a warmth she had forgotten. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of joy returning. Their connection deepened. Jason began lingering after his deliveries, not shirking his duties, but simply enjoying their conversations. He spoke about the challenges of balancing school, work, and friendships. She, in turn, offered the life lessons she had learned over decades, little truths about patience, resilience, and self-worth. Margaret began looking forward to his visits as much as he seemed to look forward to hers. One afternoon, she invited him to lunch. "I made extra soup," she said. Jason hesitated, but saw the hopeful look in her eyes and agreed. They sat at her small dining table, bowls steaming in front of them, talking like old friends. Jason told her how his father had left when he was very young, leaving just him and his mother to navigate the world. Margaret listened with compassion, her heart aching for him. In that moment, she understood why she felt so drawn to him. He was a young man searching for guidance, and she was a woman longing to give the love and wisdom she still held. As weeks turned into months, their bond became something deeper, not romantic, but profoundly human. Jason began calling her Miss Margaret affectionately. Sometimes, when his shift ended early, he would stop by just to check on her. He helped her fix a broken garden gate, carried heavy bags of soil for her flowers, and even set up her new phone when she admitted she struggled with technology. In return, Margaret became a steady presence in his life, encouraging him when he felt overwhelmed, believing in his potential when he doubted himself. Then one bright morning, Jason arrived at her door practically bursting with excitement. In his hand, he held an envelope, the acceptance letter to the university he had dreamed of attending. He ran to Margaret's house first, his joy too big to contain. Margaret cried tears of pride as she hugged him tightly, feeling as though she were embracing her own grandson. "You see, Jason," she whispered, "hard work really does pay off. You're going to do great things." Before he left for college, Jason came by one last time with a small gift, a framed photo of the two of them, taken by his friend when they had been planting flowers in her yard. At the bottom, he had written, "Thank you for believing in me." Margaret held the frame close, her heart swelling with gratitude. She realized then that her life had changed, not because she had gone looking for excitement, but because a young delivery boy had stepped into her quiet world and reminded her of the beauty of human connection. In the months that followed, Margaret still missed her late husband and longed for her children's visits. But she no longer felt invisible or forgotten. Jason called her often from school, updating her on his classes and new adventures. She continued playing her piano, tending her garden, and even volunteering part-time at the local library, places she had once abandoned to loneliness. Life wasn't silent anymore. It was full of echoes, laughter, and the unexpected sweetness of finding family in unlikely places.